Ladies and gentlemen, just one short piece of information. We will be starting a bit late, as you undoubtedly have noticed. So please stay with us, and many thanks for your patience. We will be starting at around 1:15. Thank you very much. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, if you would kindly begin taking your seats. We do want to start in about 4 minutes from now. So please kindly take your seats. Thank you so much for your patience. Good afternoon, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, and a very warm welcome to this IRENA Assembly side event organized by the Utilities for Net Zero Alliance, the Green Grids Initiative, the Energy Transition Accelerator Financing Platform, and IRENA itself. I'm Melinda Crane, a journalist with extensive experience in the clean energy sector, and it is a very great honor to accompany you this afternoon as moderator. We're here to talk about climate principles to unlock grid financing, and you hardly need a reminder from me. If we are serious about getting on track to meet the Paris Agreement's 1.5-degree cap on global warming, we need to triple renewable energy capacity by 2030. The pledge to do so was, of course, one of the outcomes of COP28 right here in the Emirates. That means countries need to start now to build out grid infrastructure that's fit for purpose. That will require massive investment. You know that far better than I. Financial flows into improving grids and flexibility measures will need to double from current levels to an average of $717 billion per year over the next 5 years. The impressive list of co-organizers of this side event is testimony to the urgency, scope, and complexity of this challenge. All of them are working to unleash capital for exactly the purpose I mentioned, to help turn the tripling up and doubling down pledge into reality by refurbishing and expanding grids. We will begin with introductory words from UNESA's co-chairs, followed by scene-setting presentations from IRENA and remarks from the Green Grids Initiative. And after that, I will open our roundtable dialogue, which brings together leading decision makers from government, international organizations, the private sector, finance organizations, and nonprofits. And we go now to a power alliance, and I mean that in both senses of the word power, that was launched a little over a year ago at COP28. It unites global utilities and power companies that serve hundreds of millions of customers worldwide, and which are committed to accelerating electrification, renewables-ready grids, and clean energy deployment now, with some help from friends like IRENA and the UN Climate Change High-Level Champions. We hear more now from UNESA's two co-chairs, starting with the CEO of TAQA Transmission, Dr. Afif Saif Al-Yafei. Excellency, you have the floor. Sorry.
Thank you, Melinda. Thank you. It gives me great pleasure to be here with you today. First, I would like to extend my gratitude to IRENA and its Director General for their, for convening these critical discussions. And a special thanks goes to the UN high-level champions for their unwavering support and the Green Grids Initiative for their leadership on the issue at hand today. I would also like to thank our co-chair, Glenn from SSE, and all UNESA members and partners for their commitment and collaboration. Let me begin by reflecting on the remarkable growth of UNESA so far. As Melinda mentioned, it was during the World Utilities Congress in 2023, where the CEOs from leading global utilities identified the need for collective action in this industry to address the challenges that often hinders us and hinders our progress. Post this, UNESA was officially launched at COP28, where we highlighted the need for tripling renewables and doubling energy efficiencies by 2030. What we launched with 31 founding members is now a thriving community of 51 organizations across 5 continents, collectively serving more than 350 million customers. Since COP28, we have already taken significant steps, such as the launch of the UNESA Action Plan and Roadmap last year at IRENA Assembly, as well as our recent announcement at New York Climate Week in September of last year which address two key elements of the action plan. Firstly, indicating our joint intent to invest more than $116 billion annually in grids and renewables, sending a demand signal to encourage capacity expansions among multiple OEMs. And also providing recommendations to the energy policymakers and the policy community to ease supply chain bottlenecks that we're faced with now. As we progress, it is important to understand that there are still many challenges in front of us. One of the most critical among them is the inadequacy of global grid infrastructure. According to the Bloomberg New Energy Finance, around $21 trillion of grid investment is needed by 2050. And this is just to expand and refurbish the global electricity systems. And according to IEA, the grid investment in emerging and developing economies, excluding China, has declined in recent years despite growing electricity demand. This highlights the pressing need for more diverse and accessible financing solutions to facilitate the required grid investments. Multilateral development banks can play an important role in addressing this challenge. As of today, the grids receive very limited climate and development financing due to the challenges associated with proving that the grids are green. And also, one of our partners with UNISA Green Grids Initiative have been working on this issue specifically, and we are grateful for your leadership and in bringing solutions and innovative thinking for discussions among decision makers. The climate finance principles of green grids that we'll put forward today offer a starting point to address this challenge by offering clear criteria for defining a green grid. These principles aim to foster trust among stakeholders and facilitate the scaling of investments required to modernize, expand, refurbish the infrastructure, particularly in emerging markets. I hope today's discussions can serve as an important step towards reforming the classification that governs climate finance, encouraging the flow of public capital to global grid infrastructure. In closing, I'd also like to share that UNISA's endorsement of the Grids and Storage Pledge at COP29 demonstrates our commitment, and removing the barriers to investment from MDBs and other climate finance channels would be a monumental step forward. I look forward to hearing your perspectives and fostering an honest, engaging discussions on how collectively we can meet these challenges. Thank you, and back to you, Linda.
Thank you very much, Dr. Al-Yafei. And we go straight away to the co-chair of UNESA, Glenn Barber, Director of Corporate Affairs at the multinational energy company SSE, based in the UK and Ireland. You have the floor.
Thank you, Melinda. And unfortunately, my colleague, Rob McDonald, the Managing Director of our transmission business, who was due to speak today, wasn't able to travel for family reasons. So it's my privilege to stand in for him today to represent SSE in our capacity as co-chair of UNESA. And I'd like to echo Dr. Afif in thanking colleagues at Arena for their wonderful job in acting as secretariat for UNESA, and also thanks to colleagues at TAC, including Dr. Afif, for their leadership and collaboration in this important vehicle. And thanks to all of you for being here today as well. So look, to be honest, there are many people around the table who will have far better insight and perspective on the challenge of mobilizing finance into grid investments in developing countries. So I will keep my colleague comments brief, partly because Dr. Afif's done a wonderful job of framing the debate for us. But I do believe there's one vital principle that we can perhaps share from our experience in building out grids in the UK, where we're responsible for building and operating the transmission network in the north of Scotland. And if any of you have visited Scotland, you will know that we don't get much solar, but we get plenty of wind and rain. And that makes our patch one of the most renewables rich on the planet, so much so that we believe the north of Scotland could account for at least 20% of the UK's clean power commitment by 2030. But delivering that represents a huge challenge, clearly. It will mean more than doubling the amount of renewables connecting just to our bit of the grid. And I think it's fair to say, if you'd asked us 10, even 5 years ago, we'd have told you that was impossible. Under the regulatory regime that we had at the time, in the time frame that we're talking about, it couldn't have been done. But the world has changed quite materially. And the global energy crisis has made clear to everybody that there is an economic and social as well as climate imperative to harness as much of the renewable homegrown energy as we can. And look, everyone around the table have heard the phrase, there's no transition without transmission, right? That penny has well and truly dropped. In the UK, that realisation has meant we're now seeing far bigger, longer-term packages of investments being approved by the regulator earlier in the process, and the regulator is taking a far more strategic, longer-term view of these issues. And that is a huge departure, believe me, from the regime that we've been used to prior. And that's no criticism of them, it's just the realisation that we now have of the scale of the challenge and the pace with which we need to deliver it. And I can't stress enough how important that mindset shift has been and will continue to be for us in enabling us to deliver what we need to do. And it has enabled us to embark on one of the largest investment programmes the north of Scotland has ever seen. We're talking about at least £22 billion worth of investment in the next price control, potentially up to £30 billion for the north of Scotland. This is enormous. And that in turn provides certainty to supply chains. They can invest in manufacturing facilities. It enables us to engage earlier with communities whose consent is going to be critical to us being able to do this. Critically, bringing it back to a relevant point, it gives us clarity to go and finance these investments for the long term. Now, the challenges facing developing countries in building out their grids are clearly very different to those that we face in the UK and in other developed countries, particularly when it comes to accessing finance. However, I do think that common principle is that we have to recognise the approaches of the past, be they the regulatory outlooks that I referenced earlier, be it supply chain consenting, or in this case finance, will not be enough to get us where we need to get to. So that means we are going to need, all of us, a fundamental mindset shift in how we think about these problems. And thinking differently about the nature of grid investments in the developing world is clearly part of that. We need to recognise the strategic overriding significance of those investments and work together to find solutions. So we therefore applaud the work that the GGI is doing and their ecosystem partners feeding into it to hopefully unlock more funding from MDBs and the wider climate finance community. And the principles being shared today are an important part of that. So with that, I would just say this is a critically important challenge. It's great to see so many in the room, and I'm very much looking forward to hearing the views of so many esteemed colleagues today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Glenn Barber. No transition without transmission is very catchy. I'll be using that phrase myself in future. Thank you. What exactly is needed to make grids fit for renewables-driven energy in future depends on countries' specific circumstances. But one prerequisite is common to all: system flexibility through enhanced interconnectors, through additional storage capacity, and more. Getting there will take time and money, which is why the need to unlock capital couldn't be more urgent. Here to tell us more is IRENA's Director of Country Engagement and Partnerships, Gürbüz Gönül. Gürbüz, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Melinda. Excellencies, UNESCO co-chairs, ladies and gentlemen, very good afternoon to all of you. It's really my great pleasure to deliver a scene-setting presentation highlighting the urgent need to unlock grid financing to accelerate the renewable-based energy transition globally. Our tracking report on tripling indicates that underinvestment in grids not only hinders the integration of new renewable capacity, but also increases project risks due to uncertainties in grid connection timelines and potential curtailment, which undermines generation capacity investments and can raise the cost of capital, reducing the benefits of the transition to consumers. Europe and North America are grappling with a delayed acceleration of grid investments while in parts of North America, aging grid infrastructure requires vital upgrades. In the Asia-Pacific region, rapid renewable expansion in countries like China and India is constrained by insufficient grid development, contributing to significant energy curtailment and regional disparities. Latin America and Africa face even greater challenges with substantial underinvestment in grid infrastructure, making the task of integrating renewables more challenging. In 2023, investments in grid infrastructure and flexibility amounted to $391 billion, 95% of which in grid infrastructure and the remainder in battery storage. And that is, in fact, significantly below the $717 billion required each year to meet the 2030 target. This number comes from our veto. And specifically, every year we need to invest at least $717 billion into grid and flexibility to be able to catch up with our renewable energy transition ambitions. Expanding interconnector capacity globally is essential for reducing bottlenecks, improving energy security. And this will require not only large investments, but also a streamlining of permitting processes, fast-tracking projects of national significance, and improving spatial planning and implementation, as well as the regulatory reforms that support the rapid development of grids and grid-enhancing technologies. Enabling a more flexible and resilient power grid is equally important. In some regions, mini-grid solutions are also important and should be promoted. Many countries that support the delivery on the targets. As of September 2024, IRENA's climate action support has been delivered to more than 100 countries through 207 activities, which included, in fact, assessments of grid hosting capacity and distribution at a high level to accommodate intermittent resources, build countries' capacity on grid assessments, and establish a working model for the electricity markets. IRENA, with partners, delivered the Africa Continental Master Plan for electricity generation and transmission that calls for grid expansion and significant investments. Our ASEAN energy transition outlook suggests significant expansion of transmission capacity aligned with the 1.5-degree ambitions, including enhancements in both cross-border interconnectivity and domestic transmission capacity. There's a new stream of work at the national level that we have engaged already, for instance, with Colombia and Morocco, to jointly develop dedicated strategies aligned with the tripling goal, where grids and flexibility constitute a key area of deep dive analysis that we undertake in these countries. And the Utilities for Net Zero Alliance, UNEZA, guided by IRENA, is spearheading the development of the grids that are ready for renewable energy. As reliable and flexible grid is a key priority for the Alliance. And the global utilities under the Alliance backed 29 pledge to boost grids and storage with a strong implementation signal and reinforce their investment commitment to annual grids and renewables, more than $116 billion US dollars. Around 48% of the planned and committed investments will go into grid infrastructure, yet larger scale investment is still needed. The Alliance with its partners, including Green Grids Initiative, is committed to work with MDBs present in this room and also, but beyond, to unlock more investments in grids. In the new round of updated NDCs, they are all expected to be submitted prior to Belém COP30. Grids should be considered among the key priorities. We encourage that the specific targets on grid development to be adequately integrated, not only to the NDCs, but also national power system strategies and proper planning. In addition to sectoral emission reduction targets, quantified energy sector targets help clarify overall goals and outcomes for project developers and investors, enabling more efficient planning and monitoring. And thanks to the general support from the UAE, IRENA has been closely collaborating with several countries on NDC updates and helping them, bring them aligned with the tripling goal, but also integrating necessary infrastructure requirements under NDCs. And let me close by stressing the crucial role of international cooperation to channel funds to areas and grid projects that can best contribute to achieving the climate, socioeconomic development, and industrialization goals of the countries. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Gürbüz Konul. So if the goal is so worthy and so urgent, what's stopping us from raising the necessary capital? Co-organizers, UNESA and the Green Grids Initiative asked their constituencies what's standing in the way, and they got an interesting answer. Marcus Stewart will fill us in on what that answer is. He heads the secretariat at the Green Grids Initiative. The floor is yours, Marcus.
Thank you, Melinda, and thank you to UNETSA and IRENA for supporting today's session. Good afternoon, Excellencies, colleagues, and friends of GGI. And we are friends because we need to work together to solve the challenges that are presented to us around grids. As Melinda said, I head up the Green Grids Initiative, or GGI, and my background is in grids. I've worked in energy for nearly 30 years and planned and developed grids on the UK system. And I really enjoy this role of working on the Green Grids Initiative, but I wish I didn't have to do it, because grids are so essential to the energy transition. They should be second nature, and they haven't. And we've been struggling to get them up the agenda. They are up the agenda now, and people are realizing that, as Glenn said, there is no transition without transmission. I love it when anybody else says that phrase. So within the Green Grids Initiative, we convene an ecosystem of actors and partners to work on accelerating the deployment of grids to enable the energy transition and tackling some of the systemic challenges that grids face. And finance and access to finance is one of those. So I'd like to introduce a critical piece of work that we have developed with multilateral development banks, IFIs, and developers to unlock financing for grids. These are the Climate Finance Principles for Green Grids. We launched these at COP29, and they're available on our website. During the course of yesterday, there were more than one panel highlighted how the transition requires directing investments more uniformly to the whole energy system, and in particular to grids and to the wider enabling power infrastructure. As per the COP29 Grids and Storage Pledge, which was signed only 2 months ago, there's been a commitment to add or refurbish 90 kilometres of grid infrastructure by 2040, and by addressing financial bottlenecks, promoting regional integration and strengthening international cooperation. But to deliver this, annual investments in grids need to double to 600 billion per annum by 2030, which is not very far away. And that will require both public and private investment to make happen. But we have a problem. Standing in the way of achieving this in the reality is only 60% of current grid investment, over 60% of current grid investment are excluded from climate finance and green bonds, as the related infrastructure does not qualify as green. Grid investments in coal-intensive regions and in most emerging and developing economies often do not count as green, even when they are a necessary precursor to an accelerated uptake of renewables. Practically speaking, this means that regions such as Southeast Asia, where grid investment is most needed for decarbonisation, don't have and won't have in the near future the required grid carbon footprint to qualify as green investments. For the same reason, regions such as Africa might not be able to access the concessional finance needed for their grid infrastructure to develop renewable ready and to attract essential private finance. In addition, the lack of consensus between MDBs, climate funds and private finances on what counts as green grids is a barrier to co-financing and securitisation for all geographies and for all stakeholders, and this risks holding back critical infrastructure investments. We currently have more than 30 taxonomies globally. We need a solution to harmonise green grids, qualification approaches, and create a space for interoperability. To this end, as I said, we launched at COP29 the Climate Principles for Green Grids. These are inspired by the existing and widely used sustainably linked loan principles and aimed at opening up the climate and green finance attribution while safeguarding against greenwashing. Having already obtained participation and positive reception from a series of IFIs and private banks, in 2025 we will be seeking formal endorsement from the wider ecosystem of finance providers and public and private recipients through bilateral and roundtable sessions. We take this opportunity to formally invite you all to engage and provide your endorsement to the finance principles. Existing taxonomy and qualification approaches are based on meeting meeting thresholds in the current or near future carbon intensity of grids that ends up excluding the majority of grid investments, and particularly grids in transition, or leaving room for reputational risk. Without prejudice to those, the principles propose that grid investments should be deemed green when the project can demonstrate a net positive contribution to emissions reduction in a way that is measurable and reported over time, and in alignment with a consistent national plan for broader decarbonisation of the economy. Grid investments are enabling and long-term. Investments are typically 20 to 40 years and beyond, and the carbon impact should be assessed over the long term and with the wider impact considered. And this is what our principles seek to achieve. They are also applicable to interconnectors as well, which are as identified as key enablers to the energy transition. More broadly, ladies and gentlemen, we need a global platform on financing, transmission and distribution, and potentially storage as well, because the issues for storage are likely to be the same for grids. Not only to convene stakeholders, but ideally to create the equivalent of a scaling solar for green grids and then disseminate the relative structuring and de-risking solutions. As the existing global convener when it comes to green grids, the Green Grids Initiative stands ready to develop a platform that will elevate and expand the current work we are doing through our Finance Task Force to take this work forward. We look forward to your engagement and participation both on the existing principles and the further work to deploy them, as there is no transition without transmission, and there's no transmission without the relevant finance. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marcus Stewart. So let's get to work. The aim of today's roundtable is to become part of the solution, to further develop proposals for overcoming the lack of consensus that we just heard about, and setting out a basis for interoperability, dialogue, and trust among different stakeholders, as Marcus said, among the friends, to create a reliable foundation for cooperation on co-financing, securitization, and the scale-up of investments in grid infrastructure expansion worldwide. This roundtable will take place in a dialogue format. Speakers will be asked to share their perspective on guiding questions that we circulated in advance. And we'll begin with speakers who confirmed interventions for specific questions, and afterward, I will open the floor for general comments by all participants. And in the interest of time, I'm going to keep my introductions super brief. And for the same reason, the allotted speaking time, here comes the bad news, is 2 minutes per intervention. We started a bit late, and I'm going to borrow from the break after this. Nonetheless, we are on a very tight timetable. So, our first guiding question asks, what are the most important drivers for significantly scaling up investments in modernization and expansion of grid infrastructure, and conversely, what you see as the most problematic barriers to investment? And we will begin with His Excellency Tourik Ibrahim. He's Minister at the Ministry of Climate Change, Environment and Energy for the Republic of the Maldives. You have the floor.
Thank you, and very good afternoon to you all. Yeah, it's a very important question, especially for Maldives and small island development states. As you know, when we upgrade the infrastructure, grid infrastructure to manage variable power flows and to ensure grid stability, we have to do it in a different way. If you look at Maldives, we have about 180 inhabited islands that is scattered across the nation, and we have another 100 and 200 resort islands again scattered across the whole of Maldives. These are not interconnected. They have their own power generation within each island, and each island has its mini grid systems. And we have the grid systems has been evolved over the last 30-40 years and it is not properly designed. So when we talk about the having renewable energy at scale, tripling the energy systems within the next by 2030, we need to have a lot of work done on every island. So that means we have to do it differently from the rest of the bigger nations. Small island states needs to have clean energy is something that is very, very important for us, but we need, and the new technology is very, very essential for us. But the investment is different. Investment is, I guess, somewhat not the normal type of investment, because it doesn't sometimes make the financial sense to invest in grid systems because it's too small. So I think when you talk about small island states, it's expensive to do it, to do the grid system, and we need to have advanced grid infrastructure to meet the high electricity consumption that we are seeing right now, but that is segregated energy, high energy consumption, which means that the capital have a separate high energy demand from the rest of the islands, and that's all segregated. There's no connection between the islands. So we see that innovation in smart grid and digital technology and AI, as well as storage solutions like batteries, battery offers opportunities to increase grid efficiency, reliability, and flexibility within the islands. These technologies reduce the cost over time and are strong incentive for investors. So for the investors, they also have to come at a long-term strategies to invest in small island states. And when you look at, just one important thing I would like to just highlight is on the second part of the question is expansion barriers. So the barriers for expansion is especially the financing, because for small islands it is very, very different. So I would like to see the multilateral financing organizations here. They are actually in the Maldives right now, but we want more of their involvement and see better financing facilities that is catered for small island development states like the Maldives. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Excellency. And what I'm hearing there is when we talk about a unified definition of green grids, we need a definition that covers all the variations across some very, very different needs that countries do have, including small grids and flexibility. So thank you very much for that. We go next to Monsieur Jean-François Gagnier, head of the Clean Energy Ministerial Secretariat. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, and thank you to Irina and UNESA for the continued collaboration and invitation to be here today. Great congratulations to GGI for the great work on the climate principles. I think this is a really good piece of work. It's very complementary to how the SEM has been working on power systems transformation for a long time. You're right, it's about time that grids get the attention that they deserve. It would be like saying I own a car and I don't want any transmission into it. Kind of not make any sense. But this is really, as you say, a generic movement towards the realization of the importance there. And when we worked with Brazil last year as both the G20 presidency and the host of the Clean Energy Ministerial in Foz do Iguaçu, in order to support their own priorities on sustainable investment, we worked on developing an action agenda for power system solutions. And so we brought 8 of our power systems work streams together, who developed over 30 different actions covering 6 specific areas that cover long-term planning, flexibility enhancements, end-use support, supply chains, to try to look at all these different barriers and how we can bring a community together to address them. And I'll focus on 2 quick examples in light of the time. But those are covered on the planning side, where we work very closely with IRENA on a STEM long-term energy scenario planning initiative, as well with our 21st Century Partnership on bringing together modelers and planners to look at the long-term energy planning, and that's very much aligned with their guiding principles, looking at what is the long-term energy transition plan, but then from there working directly with governments on developing national action plans on grid modernization and grid infrastructure. So again, aligning the investment plan to the long-term energy transition plan. And the second one is we've started a campaign with energy regulators that we call Empowering Regulators for Accelerated Decarbonization. And this is really to kind of reverse the perception that regulators are barriers to energy transformation, and actually realize that they have tools that are quite powerful in terms of supporting that transformation. But for that to happen, there needs to be a dialogue between the policymakers and the regulatory authorities so that they are enabled to use those tools. For example, considering longer-term aspects such as supply chain issues in terms of enabling utilities to really be able to address the key issues. So these are kind of two specific examples, but really what we're trying to do here is to have a very holistic approach addressing all these issues, and this is very, very important. We need to be able to look at not only the grids planning aspect, but issues like supply chains, like end-use demand and the supporting requirements for that, and looking at infrastructure really as a holistic transmission, but also distribution, storage, and interconnection. So what I hope is that we can use this dialogue and work with UNESA, GGI, and other partners as we prepare to host a ministerial in Busan, Korea at the end of August, which we hope to be able to use as a stepping stone to be able to go back to Brazil in Belém for COP30 with very strong, concrete outcomes that can enable ambition. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Monsieur Gagné. We go now to Nalin Agarwal. He's founding partner at the Climate Collective, South Asia's largest private startup accelerator for climate tech. Welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you to IRENA and the UNESA co-chairs for having us here. I'd like to focus 2 minutes just on the role of innovation in the net zero transition. So at the Climate Collective, we have accelerated about 1,000 climate tech startups, providing them with market access and funding. Now, among these startups, 46 of them have been part of Electron Vibe, which is a utility and startup piloting program, the only one of its kind in Asia. In our overall portfolio, nearly 30% of these startups focus on energy and power, which offer vital solutions for grid transformation. Just to share some of the technologies that startups have been developing, the already commercialized ones include those for grid asset health management, for example, using IoT drones, GIS, bidirectional and distributed grid management like virtual power plants and DERMS, EV charging infrastructure management, and safety enhancement systems. Some of the emerging innovations where startups are using artificial intelligence for example, optimizing CapEx deployment, operational efficiency, and performance improvements, as well as using machine learning for material discovery for new battery chemistries, right? Just as an illustration, one of the startups we supported deploys AI-based predictive maintenance for distribution transformers. Through just one pilot, it demonstrated annual savings of about $800 USD per transformer. Now, if this utility were to deploy this across the Delhi grid, it would lead to one, much more distributed renewable generation as the uptime of transformers increases, and overall cost savings of over 700 million. Right. So our conviction is that innovation is critical for achieving net zero, given many of the technologies that are needed to get us to net zero are still in early stages of development. Our experience shows that startups are really driving this climate innovation and enabling faster deployment of renewable technologies. And therefore, we offer that utilities and industry can harness existing and emerging solutions from startups to drive immediate decarbonization goals and achieve long-term net zero targets. As a UNESA partner, Climate Collective is ready to partner in this mission and supporting the international goal of tripling global RE by 2030. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So tech, clearly a very important driver of the kind of scale up that we need. We go now to Ashraf Khadam. He is Senior Global Energy Specialist at the Islamic Development Bank. Welcome, sir. You have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you for IRENA and UNESA for having me today and for organizing this important session. In fact, to address the challenge and barriers to large scale up investment in modernizing and expansion of grid infrastructure from different angles. Is from MDB perspective, greater emphasis must be placed on improving policy and regulations, technology and innovations, finance and know-how. And to succeed in achieving these goals, we can focus on the following approach. First, to improve policy and regulations by conducting gap analysis, policy and regulation support. Also, to conduct technical support and innovation through grid operator support and feasibility and business models. Also, to develop finance and investment ecosystem to identify and advance the concept notes and and studies and translating ideas and information into new concept notes, and also to support capacity building and training of public and private sectors to increase engagement in financing landscape. Also to perform dissemination and knowledge outreach through improving communication and holding conference and workshop like this, Irina. Also, I would like to speak about the Islamic Development Bank participation and intervention in that. In 2024, the Islamic Development Bank approved 10 energy projects worth approximately $1 billion. That includes 472 million US dollar for Al Manzil pumped storage hydro power plant in Morocco. This will help in grid flexibility so as to have more renewable energy and have good impact on energy transition. So this project also includes expansion and reinforcement of transmission line connected to this power plant. And as I would like to echo again the famous statements, no transition without transmission. We have to have this because transmission is the backbone of our power system. Another example I would like to tell also, we have now currently we have a project in between Saudi Arabia and Egypt. It is a mega project, interconnection transmission line. Total finance is more than 1 billion. Islamic Development Bank is joining other MDBs and other institutions. This project connecting the two largest power system in the area between Saudi Arabia and Egypt. We will have system flexibility. We will have backup for each countries. The aspect of grid flexibility, different frequency. Here we have 50 hertz, you have 60 hertz, different voltages, different capacities, and we are keen to support such projects in transmission, renewable energy, and also storage. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, underlining once again the crucial importance of flexibility. We go now to Mr. Dimitrios Papathansiou. He is Global Director of Energy and Extractive Industries in the Global Practice of the World Bank.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. For the World Bank, our investments in grids is more than half of our portfolio. Every year we invest anywhere between $8 to $12 billion. More than half of that goes to transmission and distribution. And the reason we do that is because these are the investments that fit very well with the nature of our financing. Our financing tends to be 20, 30 years. And in the case of IDA financing, we can now take it all the way up to 60 years. So the nature of our financing fits very well with the type of assets that transmissions are. But what we really need to be doing more, because even our funding is a drop in the ocean of financing that is needed, is try to help countries to put in place the right framework that will bring more financing in. The big challenge that we face globally is, first of all, attracting more private sector into the developing world. And just next to me, we were having a discussion on what Masdar has been doing and how they see some of the issues. And what is also easier and where we need to unlock more, and I think the conversation about the principles of classifying investments into green climate financing investments are important, is that there is a lot of private capital which is looking for lower risk, longer-term investments. So in general, and in theory, these are the types of assets that a big class of investors are looking for. And these are secure, well-prepared investments, and we need to be doing more on that. I think the 6 areas that Irina's slide laid out about what is needed to be put in place are all correct, and this is how we have been working on and financing on. What I would like to raise a flag of attention is what climate change means in terms of resilience and the risk that we're facing and that we see in places with what happens when we have short-circuiting, the potential sometimes that fires can start with networks. So I think our understanding of how climate change affects adaptation and resilience in networks is an area which is getting trickier and trickier. So just putting this up as an area of concern that we're looking forward to discussing more with you. And maybe the last point that I would like to mention is that we see a great potential and opportunity in undersea cables for offshore wind developments, but also interconnecting continents. One of the most interesting projects that we approved, it took us almost 12 years to get it done, is the interconnection between Tunisia and Italy. But now that this is in place, we see much more interest for other interconnections, definitely between North Africa and Europe, but all over Asia as well. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much also for the message underlining the importance of adaptability and resilience going forward as part of the overall definition of what constitutes a green grid. Let me go now to Mr. Mazin Khan. He is CFO of the Emirates-based renewable energy and green energy company Masdar.
Thank you, Melinda. It's an honor to be here representing Masdar. At Masdar, we are committed to building the equitable energy system for tomorrow that leaves no communities behind, ensures reliable access to clean and affordable energy, and supports the growth of job creation. Our investment in developing countries is testament to that statement. As almost everyone has highlighted, progress in grid infrastructure is an extremely important factor in ensuring that developers like Masdar can accelerate the pipeline from securing to operationalizing projects fast enough to meet the 2030 goals of the UAE consensus as agreed at COP28. Grids also need to be able to integrate a more diverse range of generation and storage options to manage the variability of renewable sources. At Masdar, we are working to increase the efficiency of renewable energy supply to the grid by mitigating the intermittency issues that affect solar and wind energy, primarily through the addition of battery energy storage systems. This in turn decreases the reliance of grids on non-renewable energy sources for electricity supply when the sun goes down or the wind doesn't blow. With the ability to balance the grid and provide flexibility, energy storage is absolutely critical to unlock the full potential of renewables. Digitalization is important to help grids maintain visibility of demand volumes, to manage distribution efficiently, and decide where and when to import from interconnectors and reroute electricity. At Masdar, we work with partners to advance the uses of digital technologies in the renewable energy sector. Finally, as a lot of people have already highlighted, another way companies like Masdar contribute to developing a green grid is to ensure that our projects are as green as possible, not only in the technologies that we deploy, but also in the way that they are financed. Proceeds from our $3 billion green bond program will be used to invest exclusively in new renewable energy projects, including solar, wind, and battery energy storage. The green bonds help us unlock capital to enable the company to support socioeconomic growth and deliver a sustainable future for communities across the globe. Lastly, I'd like to highlight the importance of DFIs when it comes to energy financing. The DFIs play a critical role, and again, World Bank is a primary example, and we have multiple others sitting here across the table. We work with DFIs very, very extensively to help us finance projects where the likes of commercial banks may not be fully interested in. And that really helps us advance that goal, especially when it comes to developing countries. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that message from Masdar. And finally, in this first guiding question on drivers and barriers, we hear from Siemens Middle East. Helmut von Struve is CEO.
Thank you very much, Dr. Crane, and thanks again for Irina and also UNISA for hosting this very important dialogue. Siemens is a proud partner of this very critical alliance. The demand for energy is increasing, and we have heard this already before, at a rate that makes it really impossible not to invest in modernization and also expansion of the grid infrastructure when it comes towards transmission, but also the distribution side. The increase in the electricity consumption as a whole, as well as the increased share of renewables in the generation mix, drive the complexity for not only the planning, but also the operation and the maintenance of the grids. It is a must that we build out the grid infrastructure as quickly as possible. And if you look at the US alone, they will need to double their transmission capacities within a decade. However, permitting timelines, and we've heard this before, supply chain issues, and merely also the speed at which large-scale investments can flow, put a cap on how fast we can build this infrastructure out. The complexity is likely to increase faster than we can match with infrastructure investments. And the emanating gap needs to be covered by smart technologies. We heard about technologies, innovations, that enable us to optimize the assets, investments, and operate also the grid closer to its limits, hence making more of what is already deployed in the field. Also, we need to use software to simplify and accelerate the ability to integrate the renewables into the grid. As a matter of fact, there are more renewable generation assets sitting currently idling in the world than the peak power capacity in the US, merely because grid operators cannot connect them to the grid, either for capacity shortages or because they might pose a threat to the grid stability. Technology to alleviate this challenge is readily available, and the challenge utilities are facing is immense, and the situation is more grave than it might look from the outside. The CEO of one of Germany's largest utility companies said that we will probably get to the point that up to 2030, we need to make one connection every 7 seconds of a working day. And being able to handle the integration of a grid asset every seconds is orders of magnitude away from what normal utilities, no matter where in the world, can handle as of now. Software and automation are the key to overcome this revolutionary threat of the energy transition. We need to accelerate the integration of renewables, and this has never been more pressing. We all know that achieving our bold vision of a clean net zero future isn't just about how quickly we deploy the renewable energy, but especially also how effectively we leverage technology to support and manage that transition. Technology is not only simply a tool anymore, it's the engine driving us forward and enabling us to optimize the energy systems, reduce the emissions, and ultimately power our world in a cleaner, more sustainable way. With smarter data-driven solutions that are incredibly agile, adapting quickly to shifting demands, we as Siemens are not just addressing today's challenges, but also laying the groundwork for a future that's still beyond our full grasp. These digital solutions, digital twins, for example, give us the power to turn our vision into something real, something that will stand the test of time, and no matter what challenges come our way. And coming to the end, looking ahead, the vision of autonomous grid is critical to this journey. Although it's still a vision, the technology to realize it already exists to a great extent, but we need to accelerate the adoption. As grids become more intelligent and self-regulating, they will be able to optimize energy flow, detect issues even before they arise, and adjust to real-time demands without the need to constant human interventions. And this transformation is not just about increasing efficiency, it's about unlocking the potential to push grid capacity beyond current limitations, ensuring that our energy systems can support both current and also future demands. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. von Struve. That brings to an end our first guiding question. We move on now to our second question, and we heard a great deal from all of you from these very, very strong contributions that you've made about technology as a driver, about the key technological opportunities that are out there to make our grids more flexible, more adaptable, and scale them up. At the same time, we've heard a number of you emphasize the financial gap. So let us now take a deeper dive on innovation, and we move on to our second guiding question that asks, what kind of solutions can overcome the barriers, including the financial barriers, and what best practices are already in use? And we're especially interested here in truly innovative financial mechanisms to scale up investments in grid infrastructure. And Alex Campbell has pre-registered a comment on this question. He's the Director of Policy and Partnerships at the Long Duration Energy Storage Council, LDES. Welcome.
Great, thank you very much, and thank you for the opportunity to speak. So we'll talk about solutions. So the LDES Council, quickly, we're an industry association formed of more than 60 companies, ranging from startups through to some of the biggest companies by stock market value on earth, all dedicated to the deployment of LDES, long duration energy storage, to support decarbonisation. When we say LDES, we're talking about 8 hours plus continuous discharge of energy, and that can go on for days, weeks, months, and can be sort of stored seasonally. Wide range of technologies. We've heard about pump storage hydropower already, lithium-ion batteries, but there's many more. Please do come and speak to me afterwards if you want to learn more. Our analysis suggests we need up to 3 terawatts globally to support the energy transition on grids, which is a huge amount. We've got less than 10% of that today. And we really believe that transmission and storage are 2 essential components that we need to think about holistically. But why is it not happening? We've heard about barriers beforehand. One of the critical barriers with deploying LDES is a lack of long-term revenue visibility for investors. Fortunately, we do have some countries which are taking steps to overcome this. In Italy this year, we're having a fixed price procurement by Turner, the grid operator, and in the UK, a slightly different approach, something called a cap and floor mechanism, similar to that that's used for electricity interconnectors, which will provide a minimum price, minimum revenue for investors and operators and owners over the lifetime of the assets. Every country will have a different need, a different mix, and a different approach that's appropriate for them, but there are solutions out there, and we need them quite desperately. We think we need to upscale investment around 50 times more than is happening today to get to net zero. So delighted to work with Ineza and Irina and other partners, and yeah, please do come and speak to me afterwards if you want to talk about some of those interesting policy approaches. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alex Campbell. We move now to our third guiding question, which asks how we can promote consensus on harmonized criteria for defining a green grid in a way that is acceptable to climate financiers, and how much difference that would make, as well as who can drive this effort at what level. And here, Lucia Fuselli pre-registered a comment. She chairs the Finance Working Group at the Green Grids Initiative. Over to you, Lucia.
Thank you so much. So what could promote consensus on harmonized criteria? I mean, climate finance principles promote harmonization and consensus because they focus on projects' core investment impact, net positive contribution to emission reduction, measurability, and alignment with national transition plan. And focusing on the net positive contribution will ensure projects in emerging and developing and transition economy, so those that need concessionality the most, can qualify for green and climate finance, whilst measurability and reporting on that contribution will mitigate the reputational risk, making it more acceptable to climate financiers. It would make a massive difference to financing because needs of $600 billion per annum means that no individual financial category makes it alone. Each of the previous interventions from key stakeholders in this session flagged the individual yearly contribution around 1 or 2% of that need. So co-financing and securitization, that's what the climate finance principle for green grids ultimately seek to unlock. That's why they are indispensable, and that's why consensus of them is needed, not only for inclusive access to finance, but to enable that coordinated international efforts and the attraction of private, corporate, and philanthropic investment that has been advocated in this session. So only in this way, the capital mobilization to fulfill the grids and storage pledge can be realistically achieved. And only in this way, by inclusively financing grids and storage, all the other pledges and transition commitment becomes realistically achievable. And I mean, who can drive that effort? Reaching this consensus ultimately should be championed by the organization supervising progress on the Grid and Storage Pledge, steered by anchor IFIs and private investors, and participated and contributed by all the other stakeholders, public entities, regulators, project implementers, and taxonomy working group. That's why stakeholder endorsement of the principles is the necessary next step. Endorsement for financiers, of course, but also from the rest of the value chain, as ultimately is the recipients of finance, be it governments, developers, utilities, or the public, those who will benefit the most from this harmonization. So the consultation effort towards consensus can be coordinated by a grid-dedicated super-parties global platform, and GGI, as the proposer of the climate finance principle, is uniquely positioned to cover that role. And that's why, as an organization, we indeed look forward for engagement and endorsement from all of you in the coming weeks to create that consensus, unlock finance to the level required, and fulfill the global commitments. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lucia. So let's take a deeper dive now on the climate finance principles for green grids that the GGI presented at COP29. And I'd like to get a perspective from other stakeholders on whether these, as they stand, address all the key issues for a harmonized definition of what constitutes a green grid, or are there some elements missing? And a pre-registered comment from Mr. Bruce Douglas, who's CEO of the Global Renewables Alliance, will get us started. And by the way, a second part of that question, Bruce, is what you see as key next steps for outreach to NDBs. So are the principles as they stand comprehensive enough? And what do you think needs to happen next in terms of reaching out to multilateral development banks?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you so much to the co-chairs, Taka, SSE, and of course, Irina, for your leadership on this. We're actually a consortium partner of the Green Grids Initiative, so as you can imagine, I fully support and endorse the financing principles. I actually don't think there's anything missing. We've been consulted on it many times, except urgency. Urgent actions which need to be taken on those financing principles. I think that's the key next step. I mean, we're in a desperate situation as a renewables industry. We can generate the green electrons, but currently they cannot be transmitted to the load centers. So in order to meet the tripling goal, we need 11,000 gigawatts by 2030. That's about 3 gigawatts every day between now and 2030, built and connected. If anybody knows what 3 gigawatts looks like, you'll understand the challenge. Going to your Siemens comment about connecting new connections every 7 seconds, I'm not sure how many gigawatts per second we have, but it's, you know. So there's two things. One is connecting and one is balancing. Connecting is moving the green electrons in location, and that's simple contextually to do so, much more complicated in reality. There's currently 3,000 gigawatts of renewable capacity waiting for connections. The second is balancing, which is about a bit more subtle, moving green electrons in location, but also in time. Interconnectors, innovation in terms of updating existing grids, but also flexibility. Long duration storage is a great example, demand side management, which is far from exploited. There's an upcoming challenge which is present in many markets. It's going to come to all markets, which is the cannibalization effect of variable renewables. Low or negative power prices will come to your market soon. We need to address that before it happens. So finally, on your second question about what needs to happen next, the COP28 Baku Global Storage and Grids Pledge is a great first step. There's over 50 countries who've signed that pledge. There's over 50 non-state actors who've signed it. In there is the 80 million kilometers of grids by 2040. We would say that's a great target, but again, it depends whether you're in the Maldives, in Monaco, or Mongolia, whether those millions of kilometers will have an effect. My call to this group, if you've not done so yet, is support that pledge and implement it. And finally, on NDCs. So there's a huge opportunity for countries to include not just renewable targets, but also grid targets and action plans. So not just what and when, but where. Spatial planning and how grids can connect the renewables. Thanks a lot, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Bruce Douglas. I would now like to open the floor for comment on any or all of the topics that we've addressed so far in the guiding questions. I will not read them off again. What I am going to do is tell you that our time is getting shorter and shorter. I would now like to ask you to please speak for a maximum of 1.5 minutes. If you do that, we might actually end more or less when I have just been ordered to end. Otherwise, I'll have to interrupt. I'm sorry. So we begin with Mr. James Humphrey. He is CEO of the Morocco UK Power Project, Xlinks. Over to you. Interconnector.
Thank you very much. Lovely to be here. So the Morocco UK Connector project is a 4,000-kilometre connection between Morocco and the UK. But some ideas on finance, the best practice question number 2. Things that we've found working well is we've been raising over $25 billion of finance. Firstly, by combining transmission generation, that allows you to avail offtake arrangements, in our case with the UK government and a CFD, which is a well-known mechanism. So that's one. Secondly, detailed thinking on procurement helps you unlock ECAs. So and you need to work in advance thinking through supply chain in order to do that, but that's the second key point. Thirdly, subsea gives you the option where you connect to a grid, reducing or eliminating the need for upgrades, minimizing community impact, and fitting into local supply demand. Fourthly, this gets a bit geeky, but if you get into some of the insurance side, you really need to look at your estimated maximum losses. It's quite a detailed piece of work, but if you engage early with the insurance market, that is a key enabler for financing. And finally, you need to think through some of the, in our case, we're intercontinental, political arrangements and investment agreements at the bilateral state level are also important to lenders. So those are some of the more micro ideas which we're finding working well, which we'd like to pass on. Thank you.
Very helpful. Thank you very much. We move on now to Mr. Chione Matalimanja. He is Senior Investment Officer at the AIIB. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having AIIB here. In the interest of time, I'll just highlight key points that we look as we're doing investments in AIIB that challenges grid investments. So for starters, we need to have in the markets that we operate in power sector plans that align with both national development plans as well as national climate targets, because those are the key elements that we use to justify investments in our bank. Secondly, we need to have an investment framework that allows both private and public sector together, so that then we have both players active in that market. Therefore, we maximize mobilization of private sector financing. In terms of barriers, we look at having a sector viability. So the energy sector has to be viable for us to be active in that market, but as well as having enough technical capacity to deliver the grid investments that are required. Some of the solutions that we have as a bank is we try to collaborate with fellow MDBs that are focusing on different areas. As AIB, we only focus on infrastructure. We don't do technical assistance, and therefore we mobilize or coordinate with banks that are focusing on technical assistance so that we can collaborate to unlock investments in the market. The other area that we'll focus on is we provide policy-based financing, specifically focusing on climate finance. In that way, we try to mobilize private sector financing in that market, as well as having different tools that we have, like sovereign loans, private sector loans, etc. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. We go next to Aida Sitikova. She is Director of the Energy Eurasia MEA at EBRD. Welcome.
Thank you. Indeed, grids are a bottleneck. We're seeing it certainly in our region, where despite significant progress in renewables deployment, the ability to transport and utilize remains a limiting factor. And it's for regions where renewables are abundant, yet domestic demand is limited, while we have other areas which face resource constraints, including land, but very high energy needs. As vital arteries that can enable cross-border trade, grids are high on our agenda and on the agenda of the countries where we work. For instance, the proposed undersea cable across the Black Sea, which aims to connect Romania, Georgia, and Azerbaijan, will facilitate renewables to Europe at affordable prices, bolstering the energy security. Similarly, at COP29, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, and Azerbaijan signed an MOU to develop the Trans-Caspian Green Energy Corridor, which again will take the Central Asian renewables onto Europe. And finally, the ILMET, Italy-Tunisia interconnector, which my World Bank colleague mentioned, we supported together, is under construction, will bring affordable renewables to the European market from North Africa. So we are seeing, I have to say, a number of interconnectors emerging, from MENA to Europe. Morocco X-Links was mentioned, this Egypt to Greece, GREGI interconnector, a number of others. And some of these projects are designated as of strategic importance for you. We also think it's important to see the significance for the countries of origination and to ensure that they reap the transition benefits. And it could be from a decarbonization of the domestic energy mix to helping the countries launch their green industrialization, create jobs, and develop supply chains. And the second part, of course, as was mentioned, grids play an essential role in the balancing of power markets, in the balance of power systems, and the more interconnected they are, as we understand, it will be easier to stabilize supply and demand across borders. Urgent action is needed. We completely share this sentiment. The recent example that EBRD financed in December last year was the Kazakhstan's transmission system operator 600-kilometer line. And the project targeted not just the connecting certain points. We brought together the isolated western region of the country to the national grid, enabling the energy experts while also addressing climate resilience, also mentioned before, and energy and cybersecurity. Similarly, ELMET will, which I mentioned earlier, will in short term help alleviate Tunisia's supply peaks during summer and in the long term to export Tunisian renewables power to Italy. One thing that we have to focus on is the actual the state of the existing infrastructure in the countries we work in, which in our region is quite becoming very quickly quite obsolete. Again, in December last year, we signed a project with the Uzbek National Energy Grid to build and expand their capacity. There was a mentioning, I can't avoid mentioning storage, which is a big part of what we do, what we see as a part of the solution. Lack of long-term visibility revenues is there. Examples were given for Greece and UK how to overcome those. But happy to report that maybe on the public finance side, we closed our first utility storage projects in Uzbekistan and Turkey. Again, there it was not, there was a public sector component, and we hope to see more on the private side of things, including in the MENA region. Finally, just to say, many of our renewable auctions that EBRD are administering are increasingly including the storage component. Of course, barriers are there, high upfront costs, we have regulatory and policy uncertainty, we have inconsistent frameworks across countries, perceived risks, but MDBs are essential in addressing the scale-up of investments and policy engagement. A number of different products could be considered, including public-private partnerships that can help de-risk and attract private capital. And of course, it has to go with the hand-in-hand with the policy engagement. I'll stop here, and hopefully with the participation of all stakeholders, we can build grids of the future.
Thank you very much, Director Sitikova. We go next to Hakil Narula. He is head of Breakthrough Agenda at the UN Climate Change Champions. You have the floor.
Thank you so much. And as a founding partner of the UN EZA, I would like to thank all the members and signatories to this partnership, and I would also like to urge other people on the floor to contribute and join this partnership. I wanted to highlight the need for a stronger international architecture as well as technical assistant partnership for developing a resilient grid. And in those terms, we have heard that there are investors waiting with lower risk and long-term capital. And on the other side, we have project developers who have some excellent projects. And I wanted to highlight some of the role which our team played in matchmaking of these two collaborators. And one of the projects which we led was a regional platform for climate projects. And in 2023, we actually partnered with the UN regional commissions to first look at what is the available projects across 5 continents, and we shortlisted about 500 projects worth 500 billion USD. From that, it was shortlisted to about 63 projects, and the end, we could only manage to raise about $2 billion for 19 projects which was financed. So there's a lot of loss when we look at from where we started and where we ended. So that's what I wanted to say, that we need to leverage every single dollar of public investments and get more private investments on board. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for that. We go next to Husk Power Systems Chief Marketing Officer, Mr. William Brent.
Thanks so much. So Husk Power is a leading community solar mini-grid company working in Africa and Asia. The company has currently 400 mini-grids serving 1.5 million people. That includes 2,500 kilometers of transmission and distribution, and we hope to expand that footprint to be 5,000 mini-grids by the end of the decade. We have essentially 3 recommendations. One is that building a modern and green grid is not just about energy transition. With at least 700 million people still living off the grid in Africa and Asia, it's also very much about energy access. So energy access, from our point of view in the global south, must be a central principle of any international effort to scale grid expansion. The second, and people have mentioned this many times, is the role of the private sector. This is especially the case in terms of rural and peri-urban electrification. The private sector, I think, has a much easier path to mobilizing finance and accelerating the pace of development. And third and last is that we can't ignore the importance of integrating decentralized grid solutions like mini-grids into national and regional plans for grid modernization and last mile service delivery. While centralized grids are being extended from urban centers and industrial centers outwards, decentralized grids can and should work in the opposite direction, outside in, from rural and peri-urban areas. And hopefully that leads to a future integration between the two. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We now hear from Yuval Laster. He's head of division at the OECD's Finance, Investment, and Global Relations Division. Welcome, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair, and thank for the organizing for putting the spotlight on this important issue and to highlight the fact that we finally reached the area where there are more investment on renewable energy than on fossil fuels. Let's hope to put some more focus now on grids. And I'll just really shortly emphasize on some challenges and financial opportunities that we see at the OECD based on the work that we're doing in emerging and developing countries, where we work at the country level to build frameworks and roadmaps to attract financing for the energy transition. In terms of challenges are long-standing economy-wide and sectoral barriers in investment, including financially strained state-owned enterprises and limited regulation for private sector participation that make grid financing challenge more acute in EMDEs. Additionally, we see a lack of robust regulatory frameworks that are clear, transparent, and that ensure profitability of transmission systems in a sustainable way, which is a key bridging investment grid system gap. Another challenge we see is the fact that grid financing relies too much on public finance, and we, as many others mentioned here, we need to see more commercial capital coming into the system. And for that, there are several innovative models that are available. And just to mention some of them, we need to see more corporate debt and bond raised by utilities, whole of grid concessions, privatizations of grid, independent transmission projects, and merchant transmission lines. And we are currently at the OECD are finalizing an overview of case studies and best practices from across the OECD and non-member countries on how to mobilize and unlock private finance for transition grid projects and EMDs, and we'll be happy to share these findings with you once this publication is out there. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Last comment from the stakeholders before we begin to wrap up comes from Peter Njinga. He is Managing Director and CEO of Kenya Electricity Generating Company, KenGen. And very briefly, if you would, sir. Thanks.
Thank you very much, moderator, for having me in this session. And I think it's important that I'm coming almost at the end of the discussion, because my organization in Kenya is involved in generating power. And just to inform you is that KenGen is generating about 60% of the power utilized in Kenya, and 90% of that power is green energy. And arising from this conversation, the importance of having the grid system that is stable and modernized is very critical. And I wanted to share an example of why, if we don't have financing in transmission, it can result into having what we would call the stranded power. In KenGen, we generate that power, but sometimes it is not evacuated because the transmission lines are not capable to do that. And we should also have financing in ensuring that we upgrade the existing transmission lines. Some of the lines that we have in our country are very old, and they were done at a point when the demand of power was quite low. Now the demand has gone higher. We need to have more financing into that area. Of course, technology is changing. We need to adapt new technologies. We need to adapt artificial intelligence in looking at how we transmit this energy and manage the network. In our region, we are looking at regional transmission lines interconnectivity, where we have our East African power pool that we are discussing, so that we can have power from one country flowing into other regions. And that will open opportunities for countries that can have excess power generation, being able to get opportunity to sell it to the other regions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So one urgent request for a super short statement from Argentina, please.
Yes, thank you very much. I will be very, very brief. I just want to state that regarding the NGO Green Grids Initiative principles and presented by at the COP29, and also the document Global Energy Storage and Grid Pledge, Argentina has not adhered to them, and we maintain that position. They don't agree to them in the COP29, and we maintain that position. And regardless of their content, I need to indicate that as such principles were not developed either by the organization of COP29 or the IRENA organization, it would not be appropriate for IRENA to endorse or approve them. And I also would like to seek further clarification on their final content, given that the NGO Green Grids Initiative introduced the draft during the COP29 and left it remain open for consultation over the last 3 months. So I want to see if there is any final documents regarding that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We take note of your comment. And I'm afraid we have to leave it there. Many thanks to all of you for your very valuable contributions. We've covered a lot of ground. I will not even attempt to make a summary. What I will say is that the results of this truly very productive exchange will flow into the preparation of a joint open letter that is being compiled by UNESA and the Green Grids Initiative. It will be addressed to the heads of multilateral development banks, and it will raise awareness of the urgent need to scale up investments in modernization and expansion of grid infrastructure, and will call for adoption of the climate finance principles for green grids as the basis for moving forward on a harmonized definition that can mobilize essential investment flows. I'd like to express my gratitude to all of our co-organizers for making possible this very thought-provoking and informative exchange. And it is now a great pleasure to hand over to Rachel Kite, the UK's Special Representative for Climate, for closing words.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your excellent moderation, getting us to this point. And congratulations to both Irina and I know there's different ways to say it, so I was going to say all 3 different ways to say it, but UNESA for hosting this. So I think we're at one of these points in our management of a transition where everybody around this table has rolled up their sleeves Some of the hard work is being done. There is significant progress. There are signs of hope. There is light at the end of the tunnel, and there are gathering storm clouds, and there is also plenty of reasons for people to sit on their hands if they are not confident of the direction that governments and the signals that governments are sending them. And so I think that and the UK welcomes, as we did at COP29, these principles as a way to align industry, institutions, finance, and all of the actors that are necessary in order to build the transmission frameworks we need for the energy revolution. This helps. We're also in a world, let's be frank, of working coalitions. So aligned, like-minded governments with ambition, with institutions into where we put our resources for further deployment, other institutions, technical groups, industry groups. It is a time when those kinds of working coalitions keep moving forward, even if there's uncertainty in the global landscape. That is the world that we are in. And so where do we go now, and how do we keep up the momentum? I think as a representative of a new government elected last year on a mandate of reaching net zero by 2050, but also making our energy system net zero by 2030, and with a new Clean Power Action Plan that was just announced and released recently, we are conscious that at the UK, part of our pragmatic approach to partnership is by sharing with you how we're doing what we're doing, rather than just sort of standing on a mountaintop asking everybody to do things that we haven't done ourselves. And so I think there is a significant amount of pragmatic partnership between our technical agencies, our statutory bodies, our universities, our NGOs, our civil society and government. And we hope that we can continue to be a pragmatic partner, in particular around the greening of the grids, because obviously without transmission, there's no transition. So our plan now lays out how we will reform our energy market, how we will reform the grid connections, the planning processes, the transmission and distribution network operators, how to support rapid delivery to 80 network and enabling infrastructure projects, while at the same time maintaining a robust pipeline beyond 2030. We've applied £40 billion, very different number, to that over the next 6 years. And we hope that we can provide an example of how this can happen and how this can work at a period when many other countries will be looking at how to do this. If I look today, over the next year, countries are preparing their NDCs. These are to be all economy, these are to be all sectors, these are to be 1.5 aligned, these are to be ambitious. And it will be essential to see countries get the support that they need, both to ensure that grids and the transmission challenges are in their NDCs, but then that they can turn around if they are ambitious and rely upon working coalitions and the international community for the support that they need to be able to do this. If we stand back from a global perspective, some grids are more important than others. All grids are important for the economic development, the prosperity and the peace country by country, but from an emissions perspective, obviously having successful transitions and transformations of grids in certain economies and certain geographies is absolutely fundamental. And we're going to have to find a way to be able to help everybody with ambition, but also to focus in on the blockages that are slowing down the transition of critical grids for a global emissions agenda. So you know all of this, and part of my job is to thank you for all that you're doing, to commit to you that the UK will be a partner, a pragmatic partner, I hope, over the next few years, and that we will use our convening power as well as the way we show up in other international organisations to keep pushing this agenda forward. The Global Clean Power Alliance, which we have shepherded forward, which is a way for ambitious countries, the vanguard countries in this transition, to come together to apply political support and pressure in order to unblock blockages, that we will certainly champion these principles through the GCPA and look forward to working with you with renewed vigour over the next few years. And so, even though there is uncertainty in the world, and the world is becoming more complex, It is at moments like this where sensible investment and growth opportunities become the absolute focus of our initiative. Thank you.
With that, we close the session. Congratulations.